Welcome to my humble abode, darlings. Come in out of the rain and get comfortable. I have a story to tell you, and I hope you enjoy. If you do, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Master of the World, Chapter 16. Robur the Conqueror. Robur the Conqueror. This, then, was the likeness I had vaguely recalled. Some years before, the portrait of this extraordinary man had been printed in all of American newspapers. Under date of the 13th of June, the day after this personage had made his sensational appearance at the meeting of the Weldon Institute at Philadelphia. I had noted the striking character of the portrait at the time. The square shoulders, the back like a regular trapezoid, its longer side formed that by the geometric shoulder line, the robust neck, the enormous spheroidal head, the eyes, at the least emotion burned with fire, while above them were the heavy, permanent, contracted brows, which signified such energy. The hair was short and crisp, with a glitter as of metal in the lights. The huge breast rose and fell like a blacksmith's forge, and the thighs, the arms, and hands were worthy of the mighty body. The narrow beard was the same also, with the smooth, shaven cheeks which showed the powerful muscles of the jaw. This was Robur the Conqueror, who now stood before me, who revealed himself to me, hurling forth his name like a threat within his own impenetrable fortress. Let me recall briefly the facts which had previously drawn upon Robur the Conqueror the attention of the entire world. The Weldon Institute was a club devoted to the aeronautics under the presidency of one of the chief personages of Philadelphia, commonly called Uncle Prudent. Its secretary was Mr. Philip Evans. The members of the Institute were devoted to the theory of the lighter-than-air machine, and under their two leaders were constructing an enormous dirigible balloon, the Go-Ahead. At a meeting in which they were discussing the details of the construction of their balloon, this unknown Robur had suddenly appeared and, ridiculing all of their plans, had insisted that the only true solution of flight lay with the heavier-than-air machines, and that he had proven this by constructing one. He was, in this turn, doubted and ridiculed by all members of the club, who called him, in mockery, Robur the Conqueror. In the tumult that followed, revolver shots were fired, and the intruder disappeared. That same night, he had by force abducted the president and secretary of the club, and had taken them, much against their will, upon a voyage in the wonderful airship, the Albatross, which he had constructed. He meant thus to prove to them beyond argument the correctness of his assertion. This ship, 100 feet long, was upheld in the air by a large number of horizontal screws, and was driven forward by vertical screws at its bow and stern. It was managed by a crew of at least half a dozen men, who seemed absolutely devoted to their leader, Robur. After a voyage almost completely around the world, Mr. Prudent and Mr. Evans managed to escape from the Albatross after a desperate struggle. They even managed to cause an explosion on the airship, destroying it, and involving the inventor and all his crew in the terrific fall from the sky into the Pacific Ocean. Mr. Prudent and Mr. Evans then returned to Philadelphia. They had learned that the Albatross had been constructed on an unknown isle of the Pacific called Island X. But since the location of this hidden place was wholly unknown, its discovery lay scarcely within the bounds of possibility. Moreover, the search seemed entirely unnecessary, as the vengeful prisoners were quite certain that they had destroyed their jailers. Hence, the two millionaires, restored to their home, went calmly on with the construction of their own machine, the Go-Ahead. They hoped by means of it to soar once more into the regions they had traversed with Robur, and to prove to themselves that their lighter-than-air machine was at least the equal of the heavy albatross. If they had not persisted, they would not have been true Americans. On the 20th of April in the following year, the Go-Ahead was finished and the ascent was made. From the Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, I myself was there with thousands of other spectators. We saw the huge balloon rise gracefully, and, thanks to its powerful screws, it maneuvered in every direction with surprising ease. Suddenly a cry was heard, a cry repeated from 1,000 throats. Another airship had appeared in the distant skies and now approached with marvelous rapidity. It was another albatross, perhaps even superior to the first. Rober and his men had escaped death in the Pacific, and, burning for revenge, they had constructed a second airship in their secret island X. Like a gigantic bird of prey, the albatross hurled itself upon the Go-Ahead. Doubtless, Rober, while avenging himself, wished also to prove the immeasurable superiority of the heavier-than-air machines. Mr. Prudent and Mr. Evans defended themselves as best they could, knowing that their balloon had nothing like the horizontal speed of the albatross. They attempted to take advantage of their superior lightness and to rise above her. The Go-Ahead, throwing out all of her ballast, soared to a height of over 20,000 feet. Yet even there, the albatross rose above her and circled around her with ease. Suddenly, an explosion was heard, the enormous gas bag of the Go-Ahead expanding under the dilation of its contents at this great height had finally burst. Half emptied, the balloon fell rapidly. Then, to our universal astonishment, the albatross shot down after her rival, not to finish the work of destruction, but to bring rescue. Yes, Rober, forgetting his vengeance, rejoined the sinking Go-Ahead, and his men lifted Mr. Prudent and Mr. Evans, and the aeronaut who accompanied them onto the platform of his craft. Then the balloon, being at length entirely empty, fell to its destruction among the trees of Fairmount Park. The public was overwhelmed with astonishment, with fear. Now that Rober had recaptured his prisoners, how would he avenge himself? Would they be carried away this time forever? The albatross continued to descend, as if to land in the clearing at Fairmount Park. But if it came within reach, would not the furiated crowd throw themselves upon the airship, tearing both it and its inventor to pieces? The albatross descended within 6 feet of the ground. I remember well the general movement forward with which the crowd threatened to attack it. Then Rober's voice rang out in words which even now I can repeat almost as he said them. "Citizens of the United States, the President and the Secretary of the Weldon Institute are again in my power. In holding them prisoners, I would but be exercising my natural right of reprisal for the injuries they have done me. But the passion and resentment which have been roused both in them and you by the success of the albatross shows that the soul of men are not yet ready for the vast increase of power which the conquest of the air will bring them. Uncle Prudent, Philip Evans, you are free." The 3 men rescued from the balloon leapt to the ground. The airship rose some 30 feet out of reach, and Rober recommenced. "Citizens of the United States, the conquest of the air is made, but it shall not be given into your hands until the proper time. I leave, and I carry my secret with me. It will not be lost to humanity, but shall be entrusted to them when they have learned not to abuse it. Farewell, citizens of the United States." Then the albatross rose under the impulse of its mighty screws, and sped away amidst the hurrahs of the multitude. I have ventured to remind my readers of this last scene somewhat in detail, because it seems to reveal the state of mind of the remarkable personage who now stood before me. Apparently, he had not then been animated by sentiments hostile to humanity. He was content to await the future, though his attitude undeniably revealed the immeasurable confidence which he had in his own genius, the immense pride which his almost superhuman powers had aroused within him. It was not astonishing, moreover, that this haughtiness had little by little been aggravated to such degree that he now presumed to enslave the entire world, as his public letter had suggested by its significant threats. His vehement mind had with time been roused to such overexcitement that he might easily be driven into the most violent excesses. As to what happened in the years since the last departure of the Albatross, I could only partly reconstruct this, even with my present knowledge. It had not sacrificed the prodigious inventor to create a flying machine. Perfect as that was, he had planned to construct a machine which could conquer all the elements at once, probably in the workshop of Island X. A select body of devoted workmen had constructed, one by one, the pieces of this marvelous machine, with its quadruple transformation. Then the second Albatross must have carried these pieces to the Great Eyrie, where they had been put together, within easier access of the world of men than the far-off island had permitted. The Albatross itself had apparently been destroyed, whether by accident or design, within the Eyrie. The Terror had then made its appearance on the roads of the United States and in the neighboring waters, and I have told under what conditions have been vainly pursued across Lake Erie. This remarkable masterpiece had risen through the air, carrying me a prisoner on board. Why not? Chapter 17. In the name of the law. What was to be the issue of this remarkable adventure? Could I bring it to any denouement whatever? Either sooner or later did not Robert hold the result wholly in his own hands. Probably I would never have such an opportunity for escape as had occurred to Mr. Prudent and Mr. Evans amid the islands of the Pacific. I could only wait, and how long might the waiting last? To be sure, my curiosity had been partly satisfied, but even now I knew only the answer to the problems of the Great Eyrie, having at length penetrated its circle. I comprehended all of the phenomena observed by the people of the Blue Ridge Mountain. I was assured that neither the country folk throughout the region, nor the town folk of Pleasant Garden and the Morganton were in danger of volcanic eruptions or earthquakes. No subterranean forces whatever were battling within the bowels of the mountains. No crater had arisen in this corner of the Alleghanies. The Great Eyrie served merely as the retreat of Robert the Conqueror, this impenetrable hiding place where he stored his materials and provisions had without doubt been discovered by him during one of his aerial voyages in the Albatross. It was a retreat probably even more secure than that as yet undiscovered Island X in the Pacific. This much I knew of him, but of this marvelous machine of his, of the secrets of its construction and propelling force, what did I really know? Admitting that this multiple mechanism was driven by electricity, and this electricity was, as we know it had been in the Albatross, extracted directly from the surrounding air by some new process. What were the details of this mechanism? Had I not been permitted to see the engine, doubtless I should never see it. On the question of my liberty, I argued thus. Robert evidently intended to remain unknown as to what he intended to do with his machine. I fear, recalling his letter, that the world would expect from it more of evil than of good. At any rate, the incognito which he had so carefully guarded in the past must mean to preserve in the future. Now only one man can establish the identity of the master of the world with Robert the Conqueror. This man is I, his prisoner. I who have the right to arrest him. I, who ought to put my hands on his shoulders, saying, 'In the name of the law.' On the other hand, could I hope for a rescue from without? Evidently not. The police authorities must know everything that had happened at Black Rock Creek. Mr. Ward, advised of all the incidents, would have reasoned on the matter as follows. When the Terror quitted the creek, dragging me at the end of her hawser, I had either been drowned, or since my body had not been recovered, I had been taken on board the Terror and was in the hands of its commander. In the first case, there was nothing more to do than to write deceased after the name of John Strock, Chief Inspector of the Federal Police in Washington. In the second case, could my confreres hope to ever see me again? The two destroyers which had pursued the Terror into the Niagara Falls had stopped, perforce, when the current threatened to drag them all over the falls. At that moment, night was closing in, and what could be thought on board the destroyers but the Terror had been engulfed in the abyss of the cataract? It was scarce possible that our machine had been seen when, amidst the shales of night, it rose above the Horseshoe Falls, or when it winged its way high above the mountain on its route to the Great Erie. With regards to my own fate, should I resolve to question Robert, would he consent even to appear to hear me? Was he not content with having hurled at me his name? Would not that name seem to him to answer everything? The day wore away without bringing the least change to the situation. Robert and his men continued actively at work upon the machine, which apparently needed considerable repair. I concluded that they meant to start forth again very shortly, and to take me with them. It would, however, have been quite possible to leave me at the bottom of the Erie. There would have been no way by which I could have escaped, and there were provisions at hand, sufficient to keep me alive for many days. What I studied particularly during this period was the mental state of Robert. He seemed to me under the dominance of a continuous excitement. What was in that his ever-seething brain now mediated? What project was he forming for the future? Towards what region would he now turn? Would he put in execution the menaces expressed in his letter? The menaces of a madman? The night of the first day I slept on a couch of dry grass in one of the grottos of the Great Erie. Food was set for me in this grotto each succeeding day. On the 2nd and 3rd of August, the three men continued at their work scarcely once, however, exchanging any words. Even in the midst of their labors, when the engines were all repaired to Robert's satisfaction, the men began putting stores aboard their craft, as if expecting a long absence. Perhaps the Terror was about to traverse immense distances. Perhaps even the captain intended to regain the Island X in the midst of the Pacific. Sometimes I saw him wander about the Erie, buried in thought, or he would stop and raise his arm towards heaven, as if in defiance of that God with whom he assumed to divide the empire of the world. Was not his overweening pride leading him towards insanity? An insanity which his two companions, hardly less excited than him, could do nothing but subdue. Had he not come to regard himself as mightier than the elements which he had so audaciously defied even when he possessed only an airship, the Albatross? And now, how much more powerful had he become when earth, air, and water combined to offer him an infinite field where none might follow him? Hence I had much to fear from the future, even the most dread catastrophes. It was impossible for me to escape from the Great Erie before being dragged into a new voyage. After that, how could I possibly get away while the Terror sped through the air or the ocean? My only chance must be when she crossed the land, and did so at some moderate speed, surely a distant and feeble hope to cling to. It will be recalled that after our arrival at the Great Erie, I had attempted to obtain some response from Robert as to his purpose with me, but I had failed. On this last day, I made another attempt. In the afternoon, I walked up and down before the large grotto where my captors were at work. Robert, standing at the entrance, followed me steadily with his eyes. Did he mean to address me? I went up to him. "Captain," I said, "I have already asked you a question which you have not answered. I ask it again. What do you intend to do with me?" We stood face to face, scarce 2 steps apart. With arms folded, he glared at me, and I was terrified by his glance. Terrified that this is the word. The glance was not that of a sane man. Indeed, it seemed to reflect nothing whatever of humanity within. I repeated my question in a more challenging tone. For an instant I thought Robert would break his silence and burst forth. "What do you intend to do with me? Will you set me free?" Evidently, my captor's mind was obsessed by some other thought, from which I had only distracted him for a moment. He made again that gesture which I had already observed. He raised one defiant arm towards the zenith. It seemed to me as if some irresistible force drew him towards those upper zones of the clouds. That he belonged no more to the earth, that he was destined to live in space, a perpetual dweller in the clouds. Without answering me, without seeming to have understood me, Robert re-entered the grotto. How long the sojourn, or rather relaxation of the terror, in the Great Eyrie was to last, I did not know. I saw, however, on the afternoon of this 3rd of August, that the repairs and the embarkation of the stores were completed. The hold and lockers of our craft must have been completely crowded with the provisions taken from the grottos of the Eyrie. Then the chief of the 2 assistants, a man whom I now recognize as that John Turner, who had been mate of the Albatross, began another labor. With the help of his companion, he dragged to the center of the hollow all that remained of their materials. Empty cases, fragments of carpentry, peculiar pieces of wood which clearly must have belonged to the Albatross, which had been sacrificed to this new and mightier engine of locomotion. Beneath this mass there lay a great quantity of dried grasses. The thought came to me that Robert was preparing to leave this retreat forever. In fact, he could not be ignorant that the attention of the public was now keenly fixed upon the Great Eyrie, and that like some further attempt was likely to be made to penetrate it. He must not fear that some day or other the effort would be successful, and that men would end by invading his hiding place. Did he not wish that they should find there no single evidence of his occupation? The sun disappeared behind the crests of the Blue Ridge. His rays now lighted only the very summit of the black dome towering in the northwest. Probably the Terror awaited only the night in order to begin her flight. The world did not yet know that the automobile and boat could also transform itself into a flying machine. Until now, it had never been seen in the air. And would not this 4th transformation be carefully concealed until the day when the master of the world chose to put into execution his insensate menaces? Towards 9 o'clock, profound obscurity enwrapped the hollow. Not a star looked down on us. Heavy clouds, driven by a keen eastern wind, covered the entire sky. The passage of the Terror would be invisible, not only in our imminent neighborhood, but probably across all the American territory, and even the adjoining seas. At this moment, Turner, approaching the huge stack in the middle of the Eyrie, set fire to the grass beneath. The whole mass flared up at once. From the midst of a dense smoke, the roaring flames rose to a height which towered above the walls of the Great Eyrie. Once more the good folk of Morganton and Pleasant Garden would believe that the crater had reopened. These flames would announce to them another volcanic upheaval. I watched the conflagration. I heard the roarings and cracklings which filled the air. From the deck of the Terror, Robert watched it also. Turner and his companion pushed back into the fire the fragments which the violence of the flame had cast forth. Little by little the huge bonfire grew less. The flame sank down into a mere mass of burnt-out ashes, and once more all was silent and the blackest night. Suddenly I felt myself seized by the arm. Turner drew me towards the Terror. Resistance would have been useless, and moreover, what could be worse than to be abandoned without resources in this prison whose walls I could not climb? As soon as I set foot on the deck, Turner also embarked. His companion went forward to the lookout. Turner climbed down into the engine room, lighted by electric bulbs, which, not a gleam, escaped outside. Robert himself was at the helm, the regulator within the reach of his hand, so that he could control both our speed and direction. As to me, I was forced to descend into my cabin, and the hatchway was fastened above me. During that night, as on that of our departure from Niagara, I was not allowed to watch the movements of the Terror. Nevertheless, if I could see nothing of what was passing on board, I could hear the noises of the machinery. I had first the feeling that our craft, its bow slightly raised, lost contact with the earth. Some swerves and balancings in the air followed. Then the turbines underneath spun with prodigious rapidity, while the great wings beat with steady regularity. Thus the Terror, probably forever, had left the Great Erie and launched into the air as a ship launches into the water. Our captain soared above the double chain of the Alleghanies, and without doubt he would remain in the upper zones of the air until he had left all the mountain region behind. But in what direction would he turn? Would he pass in flight across the plains of North Carolina, seeking the Atlantic Ocean, or would he head to the west to reach the Pacific? Perhaps he would seek to the south, the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. When day came, how should I recognize which sea we were upon, if the horizon of the water and the sky encircled us on every side? Several hours passed, and how long they seemed to me. I made no effort to find forgetfulness in sleep. Wild and incoherent thoughts assailed me. I felt myself swept over worlds of imagination as I was swept through space by an aerial monster at the speed which the Terror possessed. Whether I might not be carried during this interminable night, I recalled the unbelievable voyage of the Albatross, of which the Weldon Institute had published an account, as described by Mr. Prudent and Mr. Evans. What Robert the Conqueror had done with his first airship, he could do even more readily with this quadruple machine. At length, the first rays of daylight brightened my cabin. Would I be permitted to go out now, to take my place upon the deck as I had done upon Lake Erie? I pushed upon the hatchway. It opened. I came halfway out upon the deck. All about was sky and sea. We floated in the air above the ocean, at a height which I judged to be about 1,000 or 1,200 feet. I could not see Robert, for he was probably in the engine room. Turner was at the helm, his companion on the lookout. Now that I was upon the deck, I saw what I had not been able to see during our former nocturnal voyage. The action of those powerful wings which beat upon either side at the same time that the screws spun beneath the flanks of the machine. By the position of the sun, as it slowly mounted from the horizon, I realized that we were advancing towards the south. Hence, if this direction had not been changed during the night, this was the Gulf of Mexico which lay beneath us. A hot day was announced by the heavy, livid clouds which clung to the horizon. These warnings of a coming storm did not escape the eye of Robert when, towards 8 o'clock, he came on deck and took Turner's place at the helm. Perhaps the cloud bank recalled to him the water spout in which the Albatross had so nearly been destroyed. or the mighty cyclone from which he had escaped, only as if by a miracle, above the Antarctic Sea. It is true that the forces of nature, which had been too strong for the albatross, might easily be evaded by this lighter and more versatile machine. It could abandon the sky where the elements were in battle and descend to the surface of the sea, and if the waves beat against it, if were there too heavy, it could always find calm in the tranquil depths. Doubtless, however, there were some signs by which Rober, who must be experienced in judging, decided that the storm would not burst until the next day. He continued its flight, and in the afternoon, when we settled down upon the surface of the sea, there was not a sign of bad weather. The Terror is a seabird, an albatross, or frigate bird, which can rest at will upon the waves. Only we have this advantage, that fatigue has never any hold upon this metal organism, driven by the inexhaustible electricity. The whole vast ocean around us was empty. Not a sail nor a trail of smoke was visible, even on the limits of the horizon. Hence our passage through the clouds had not been seen and signaled ahead. The afternoon was not marked by any incident. The Terror advanced at easy speed. What her captain intended to do, I could not guess. If he continued in this direction, we should reach some one of the West Indies, or beyond that, at the end of the Gulf, the shore of Venezuela or Colombia. But when night came, or perhaps we would be again rise to the air to clear the mountainous barriers of Guatemala and Nicaragua, and take flight towards Island X, somewhere in the unknown regions of the Pacific. Evening came. The sun sank in an horizon red as blood. The sea glistened around the Terror, which seemed to raise a shower of sparks in its passage. There was a storm at hand. Evidently our captain thought so too. Instead of being allowed to remain on deck, I was compelled to re-enter my cabin, and the hatchway was closed above me. In a few moments from the noise that followed, I knew that the machine was about to be submerged. In fact, 5 minutes later, we were moving peacefully forward through the ocean's depths. Thoroughly worn out, less by fatigue than by excitement and anxious thought, I fell into a profound sleep. Naturally this time, and not provoked by any spurific drug. When I awoke, after a length of time which I could not reckon, the Terror had not yet returned to the surface of the sea. This maneuver was executed a little later. The daylight pierced my porthole, and at the same moment I felt the pitching and tossing to which we were subjected by a heavy sea. I was allowed to take my place once more outside the hatchway, where my first thought was for the weather. The storm was approaching from the northwest. Vivid lightning darted amidst the dense black clouds. Already we could hear the rumbling of thunder echoing continuously through space. I was surprised, more than surprised, frightened by the rapidity with which the storm rushed upwards towards the zenith. Scarcely would a ship have had time to furl her sails to escape the shock of the blast before it was upon her. The advance was as swift as it was terrible. Suddenly the wind was unchained with unheard violence, as if it had suddenly burst from this prison of clouds. In an instant, a frightful sea arose. The breaking waves, foaming all along their crest, swept with their full weight over the Terror. If I had not been wedged solidly against the rail, I should have been swept overboard. But there was one thing to do: to change our machine again into a submarine. It would find security and calm at a few dozen feet beneath the surface. To continue to brave the fury of this outrageous sea was impossible. Rober himself was on deck, and I awaited the order to return to my cabin. An order which was not given. There was not even any preparation for the plunge. With an eye more burning than ever, impassive before this frightful storm, the captain looked it full in the face as if to defy it, knowing that he had nothing to fear. It was imperative that the Terror should plunge below without losing a moment. Yet Robert seemed to have no thought of doing so. No, he preserved his haughty attitude, as of a man who in his immeasurable pride believed himself above or beyond humanity. Seeing him thus, I asked myself with almost superstitious awe if he were not indeed a demonic being, escaped from some supernatural world. A cry leaped from his mouth and was heard amid the shrieks of the tempest and the howlings of the thunder. "I, Robert, the master of the world!" He made a gesture which Turner and his companion understood. It was a command, and without any hesitation, these unhappy men, insane as their master, obeyed it. The great wings shot out, and the airship rose as it had risen above the falls of Niagara. But if on that day it had escaped the might of the cataract, this time it was amidst the might of the hurricane that we attempted our insensate flight. The airship soared upward into the heart of the sky, amid 1,000 lightning flashes, surrounded and shaken by the bursts of thunder. It steered amidst the blinding, darting lights, courting destruction at every instant. Robert's position and attitude did not change. With one hand on the helm and the other on the speed regulators while the great wings beat furiously, he headed his machine towards the very center of the storm, where the electric flashes were leaping from cloud to cloud. I must throw myself upon this madman to prevent him from driving his machine into the very middle of this aerial furnace. I must compel him to descend to seek beneath the waters a safety which was no longer possible, either upon the surface of the sea or in the sky. Beneath we could wait until this frightful outburst of the elements was at an end. Then, amid this wild excitement, my own passion, all my instincts of duty arose within me. Yes, this was madness. Yes, I must not arrest this criminal whom my country had outlawed, who threatened the entire world with his terrible invention. Must I not put my hands upon his shoulders and summon him to surrender to justice? Was I or was I not Strock, the chief inspector of the federal police? Forgetting where I was, 1 against 3, uplifted in the mid-sky above a howling ocean, I leapt towards the stern, and in a voice which rose above the tempest, I cried as I hurled myself upon Robert, "In the name of the law, I—" Suddenly, the Terror trembled as if from a violent shock. All her frame quivered, as the human frame quivers under the electric fluid, struck by the lightning in the very middle of her powerful batteries. The airship spread out on all sides and went to pieces. With her wings fallen, her screws broken, with bolt after bolt of the lightning darting amidst her ruin, the Terror fell from the height of more than 1,000 feet into the ocean beneath. So quoth this raven. One more chapter, my darlings, and it is getting good. Have a lovely week, my darlings. May the festive season, whatever you celebrate, Yule, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, or just winter, I hope you're enjoying it. And I will catch you next time. Bye-bye. What? You're still here after the whole story? I really appreciate that, darlings. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And I always love to hear from you. Have a glorious day, my darlings.